Hello folks, welcome to the third video in the Learning SourceMod series. If you haven't seen the first or second one, go ahead and check that out. But today we're going to be talking about something a little different. You're not going to be learning about how to register console commands. You're not going to be learning about branching or anything like that yet. Today what we're going to be covering will be data types. Now, I know this doesn't seem very exciting, but unless you have a good understanding of the SourceMod type system, you won't be able to really understand exactly what's going on. So I'm going to be teaching you about how functions are made, what a function prototype is, along with how to use certain types and what to expect. So we're going to be working inside of onPlug and Start today. Nothing here is going to be compiled necessarily. This isn't very hands-on. What we're going to be mainly talking about is just what types are there, what do types mean, why we have types, stuff like that. All right. So there are a few types in SourcePon. I'm going to go ahead and list them out. These are kind of the few main ones, and you can also define your own types, which is kind of cool. So starting off, integer. It's definitely the most important one. Secretly, Boolean and float are integers in the background. Everything in SourcePon is built around a type called cell T. Cell T is definitely internal. You don't have to use it. It's not real. You can't physically use it in SourcePon. This is invalid. But secretly, everything's kind of cell T in the background. Just know that everything except characters is cell T. But so an integer, what's an integer, right? An integer is a whole number, right? It can be in the form like 1, 2, 3. It can be 0. It can be negative 1, 2, 3. There is a limit to how high and low it can go, but that's not important. You should have never hit that limit. Yeah, so that's an integer. Booleans are either true or they are false. There's no in between. It's either true or false. Floating point numbers are decimals, so it can be like 12.5, 1.2, 62.6. The only difference between an integer and a float is that they don't have to be whole numbers, right? There are some caveats to float that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But yeah, and then a character. A character, as you would expect, would just be a single letter, right? That can be anything in the form of this. Now, I know this may seem confusing, right? We put some numbers in here, but what we're actually doing is we're representing the character number 2, like the character 2, right? We don't care about the number 2. We're talking about the character that is the number 2. Yeah, so let's go ahead and use this, right? So if we declare an integer, right, and we'll call it a, we can set it equal to 23, for example. Booleans or bools can be, true or obviously false. A floating point number can be a decimal, right? And then a character is just a single character. So yeah, so these are kind of like the four main types that you're going to use. A character in itself, just a lone character, isn't especially useful until we start talking about arrays. So let's go ahead and do that, right? So let's talk about arrays. So you can have a single number, right? But if you want to have, let's say, a group of 5 numbers together, you would do something like this. So let's say we had an int array of 5, right? What we're doing is we're declaring a space to store 5 integers, right? So so we can do this like that, using this syntax. So boom, we have 5 integers right there stored. And to access one of them, right, we grab the array, and we're programmers, right? We as a programmer, you always count from 0. So this is kind of a confusing concept, especially for beginners. If you notice, I titled the first tutorial 0, and that's because we always count from 0 as we're programmers. So there are 5 elements, right? So let's go ahead and count them. So we have the first one, right? We have the second one. And I know this is kind of redundant, but you'll see in a second. We have the third. And then we have the fourth one. I'm going to go ahead and remove these because we're declaring the variable. We have already declared the variable a, so this would actually give us an error. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, or at least just kind of comment this out. So we have an array storing 5 numbers, right? Let's count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If you were to try to do array 5 to get what you would think would be the 5th character, you're actually grabbing the 6th character from 0, and we've only allocated 5. So this is an error. This is wrong, because there's only 5 characters, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully you guys understand that. It's kind of an interesting concept, but yeah. So we can go ahead and store five numbers. We can do this with every single type. But characters are a little special, right? I'm not going to do the example for Boolean or float. It's the same thing. But for characters, we get something a little more interesting. So we can go ahead and allocate a string, right? Like, let's say string. We have to give it a size, right? So let's go ahead and just give it an arbitrary size so it's big, and we'll just do test, right? Let me go ahead and compile this to make sure that my syntax is alright. Yep, it's okay. It's saying that we've never used it, and that's true. Like, we haven't used like the string anywhere, but an array of characters is called a string, right? And it uses this special syntax with the double quotes. And if you notice, these are double quotes. And it stores a string, right? Double quotes, these are all strings. Single quotes are used for characters, like this example here, where we have to use the single quote for the character. Now, if you guys remember back to the first episode, I had to use the single quote, and I said I'd explain later. The reason I had to use a single quote here and not the double quote was that if you do use the double quote, do you notice how weird this looks? So you see how it's kind of messed up? It's because to the compiler, the double quote means something special, right? The double quote means the start or end of a string. So what we're doing here, if you want to read it like a computer, we start the string, we end the string, and then there's just hello world. And then we start a new string and then end it, and there's nothing there, right? So you have to use this thing called escape sequences, where you use a backslash. And what that does, it tells the compiler, oh, hey, I don't mean to end the string, I mean to use this character, right? So it's a little complicated. It's okay if you don't fully understand it yet, but that's just why I had to use the single quotes here, because that doesn't end the string in the compiler. So that's why you might see the little backspace and such, because that's called an escape sequence. You can look it up online. Pon model C++ escape sequences quite well. So if you can go ahead and look up, C++ escape sequences, and it's all going to be the same. Yeah. So anyway, moving forward, we have a string, right? An array of characters, and we have test, right? So what we can do is that we could print to server, right? And we can just give it that string, and it'll work fine if we build it, right? It'll work. And so what we're doing, we're allocating some space for 32 characters. Right, we're only giving it 4, and that's okay. But we're giving 32 characters, and that's it. Characters are a little special. You could allocate this in a different way, but this is definitely like the most common. Something that doesn't seem obvious here is that characters themselves, right? When you read a string, what you're giving them is the sorry, I have to think about how to explain this to not confuse you. It's kind of clear that we're storing 4 characters, right? So if we were to put 4 here, it seems like it would make sense, right? Because we only have 4 characters, but there's actually a secret character at the end of this. So if we put 5, right, the 5 is the correct size for a string of length 4. And the reason for that is that at the end of the string, there's a secret character called the Null Terminator, right? And what that does, it is a byte of 0 at the end of a string, because how string reading works is that when you pass the string to print a server, what it does, it just keeps reading characters, right? It'll read T, it'll read E, it'll read S, it'll read T, and then it'll stop when it hits the 0, and it won't print the 0. So that little secret 0 at the end is what uses that last element, the 5th element. So yeah, so we talked a little bit about arrays, we talked a little bit about strings. This is just basic data type stuff. Super important to make sure you understand. If you have any questions, comment below, and I'll try to help you out. Or you can ask on the SourceMod forums. People are really helpful over there. And that kind of goes for everything in your journey of learning how to do all this. Everything is like dumb questions are great. I've asked a ton when I started out, and yeah, so talked a little bit about arrays, talked a little bit about what strings are. They're just an array of characters. Talked a little bit about how to use them. And yeah, that's it. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, ask me for more, and I'll definitely make more. So thanks, folks. I'll see you around.